From the Pattaya People Media Group Studios, we proudly present Personalities.
My guest in the studio today is Barry John Upton, born on the 25th of February 1954 in Hastings in England. Well, welcome to the studio, Barry.
Thank you.
The first question to you is about your childhood, of course, starting with that. You were a music performer already from childhood, I believe.
Yeah, I got a big interest when my mother brought out from the loft one day an accordion, and she used to play it in the war in a band. And she started playing some tunes on it, and I just thought it was a fantastic thing to be able to do, to be able to play music out of something like that. But I didn't really want to take that much interest in the accordion, so I asked for piano lessons. And that was the best thing I ever did, really, because it taught me about music. And after that, after the grounding I had as a child in the piano, I taught myself to play the guitar and so many other instruments as well.
And music became your destiny. And of course, one thing that is very special about Barry Upton is, of course, all the interesting people you met in your career. And well, tell us some of the highlights of that.
I suppose one of the biggest highlights was meeting Paul McCartney at Abbey Road in the very studio that the Beatles recorded all their tracks in. I mean, I was a big Beatles fan when I was growing up, and I still am a massive Beatles fan. So that was probably the highlight, a big highlight. But I also met Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys in New York, and he was another great idol of mine, great songwriting. He's written so many classic songs.
Well, to talk to Barry Upton and not mentioning the Beatles will be absolutely wrong. And actually, you have the same birthdays as George Harrison.
Yeah, I've been very proud about that. When I found that out, I thought, well, he's one of my favourite Beatles. Him and John Lennon, I think, were my two favourites. One
of the highlights of your career was obviously when you joined the famous band BROTHERHOOD of Man. Tell us all about it.
Okay, right. Well, I was playing in a resident band in a nightclub in Watford, just north of London, and I'd already met BROTHERHOOD of Man in a recording studio. They were in the next studio. I was recording in a smaller studio, but in the other studio, you used to get bands like The Who, The Hollies, Kate Bush, and one day BROTHERHOOD of Man. I always went in and said hello. So they obviously saw that I looked like one of the guys in the band, and it just so happened this guy wanted to leave because he had a family. So then, a bit of a coincidence, but a couple of weeks later, they were the top of the bill at this particular venue where I was in the resident band. And they just saw me as the perfect replacement for him, you see. So I got offered the job. I got offered an audition, went for the audition, but I was the only one that they auditioned. So I got the job very easily.
You played in front of very famous people. And I think that probably the most famous was the Pope.
Yes.
Tell us about that experience.
We were on tour with David Soul, a special guest on the David Soul tour, and we were at one of the sound checks. And Martin, who was the other guy in BROTHERHOOD of Man, he suddenly comes out and he says, hey, we've got a gig on Saturday, we're playing for the Pope. And we went, nah, that's a wind-up, that's got to be a wind-up. No, and he started laughing, it's definitely happening. And sure enough, come Saturday, we had a police escort going into Canterbury to do this show where we headlined in Victoria Park when the Pope landed and went to the cathedral, and we were part of this show. And then he came back, and there was this massive crowd. So on his return, it was quite amusing because we were just finishing Save Your Kisses for Me, and he suddenly came along in the Pope-mobile, and somebody shouted up to me, I think it was Mike's manager from BROTHERHOOD, and he shouted up, play When the Pope Goes Marching In. And I didn't even have time to think about it. I just went, G, to all of the band. We started singing, oh, when the Pope goes marching in. And then I suddenly looked around, there was these religious leaders that were around at the time, looking at me like, open mouth. I thought, oh no, what have I done? you know, and you've got like 10,000 people there. You've got the world's media, and it was on the news program that evening, and they said on his return to Victoria Park, the music wasn't quite so holy.
But people really liked it. They were clapping
They
their
loved
hands.
it. They all joined in.
Yeah.
They were all singing along, and actually, the Pope, he was given the microphone, and the first thing he did was turn around and he thanked us. And
Very
he did,
nice
and he did the
indeed.
whole bit to us. And went, way.
Well, Brotherhood of Man and other bands you played with has been pop music. And on your website, friends call you a pop-tart. What is a pop-tart?
Suppose you could say a musical prostitute, really, because, and I'm quite pleased with that, because it means that I've had a lot of hits and I've compromised a lot, you know, with my musical integrity, as some musicians would say. But I've always thought there's more credibility in having a song up the charts than being out of it. So, yeah, I've produced all kinds of music from credible artists like Frankie Vaughan, right the way through to the Cheeky Girls and Steps, which was a million-selling group eventually, but some see it as a bit cheesy. So, yeah, I was labelled that by a very good friend of mine, a guy called Shane Ritchie, and he says, "You're just a pop-tart." And I thought, actually, you're exactly right.
Another side of Barry Upton is your love for football. And I know that Southampton is very dear to your heart. Well, tell us about your relationship with football.
Well, when I was growing up, I grew up in a place called Luton and supported my local side. Luton, I saw them go from the 4th division, the old 4th division, to the 1st division in about 6 seasons. And it was just exciting all the time. And I got involved with the club. I used to sell programs. This was as a teenager. And I even used to have to go and phone up, get the halftime scores. This is before we had internet, of course. And then I used to climb up this ladder and put these slates in to the big halftime scoreboard. So I felt like I was part of the club, you know. I used to go on the away train to the away games and stuff. But in more recent years, when I moved to Southampton, I thought I should really support them. And yeah, got involved with them. And then in 2003, they got to the FA Cup final. And I'd already done a couple of football songs before for Chelsea, and Crystal Palace had hits with them. And so I phoned them up and says, "Anybody doing a record with you, a CD?" And they said no. So I said, "Can I do it?" So I ended up actually recording the supporters singing "When the Saints Go Marching In," producing a record, and I managed to phone up Matt Letizia, who was a long-serving Southampton
A Southampton icon.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
he's been there all his career, and I knew the supporters would love it if he was on it. And he just came straight over after training. As soon as I phoned him, he jumped at the chance and came over and put this kind of semi-rap thing on it. And yeah, he said he got a lot of credibility with his son because he did a rap on, and I called it Saint Supporters featuring MC Letiz. So yeah, he liked that.